Guten Tag, Vatos, to one of the most venerated fantasy RPGs of all time, and the one with the most fractured base. I'm talking Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the game that lets you play out your favorite bits of Games Workshop's famous wargame, only spending hundreds of dollars on the books instead of thousands of dollars on the miniatures, where you can play the part of any number of regular people of the old world, facing off some of the worst creatures chaos can throw at you, and some of them you might be able to even kill. Like when you take your Wood Elf Warband to the tournament and draw a Chaos Dwarf army in the first round. This game doesn't even try to be fair. I'm Mr. Welch, and today I'm sharing the Gospel of Hashut and the other lesser Chaos gods. Warhammer was first published in 1986 by Games Workshop itself, back when they made their own RPGs. The game was very well received and still holds up today, but it wasn't profitable, so it was discontinued. That would be it, except Hogshead Publishing in England and Nexus Editress in Italy asked to license the old game and expand on it, and that brought it back to public view, even winning awards for their adaptions. The game itself was written by a host of well-established British game designers, including Rick Priestley, Graham Davis, Jim Bambra, Richard Hallowell, and Phil Gallagher. It presented a dark world of impending doom where monsters roam the countryside, magic is almost as dangerous to the caster as the target, and anyone you know might be an evil cultist. The game is brutal in nature. The mechanics for 3 of the 4 editions used a percentile system with a template overlay style character creation. You start with a small number of playable races, human, elves, dwarves, and halflings to begin with. As I said, the game isn't balanced. Elves and dwarves are just better than humans. They get higher stats, better class options, and more skills. They also know this, and will lord it over humans every chance they get. One side effect is their screams often cause those with skill in medicine to become deaf, unable to hear the elf's cries for healing as they bleed out just feet from the people they were mocking minutes before. I can't find that rule in the book anywhere, but it does seem to be followed by most human players. All the editions use the same stats, which are derived largely from the original wargame, with a few minor differences in additions. You've got weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, and fellowship, among others. You roll these at random based on your race, with elves getting the most bonuses and halflings getting the fewest bonuses. Then you pick your starting class, which is like a template like warrior, rogue, or academic, at least in first edition. These give you a starting talent, and then you determine your career based on your class. Not all the careers are prestigious or even useful. Once you get your career, it modifies your characteristics and gives you some skills, and then your character is practically done. Each career has an advanced scheme telling you what you can learn from that career before you have to switch careers. Veteran adventurers will have numerous careers in their history. One core aspect of Warhammer that is present across all editions is that magic is very potent, but very dangerous. Magic draws from the realms of chaos, where the evil gods live and a whole host of demons accompany them. These gods are prophesied to destroy the world one day, in one of 2 very badly written world-ending events that bring about the destruction of all forces except chaos. Anything that tries to stop this oncoming storm of chaos will be defeated, often in the most implausible, eye-rolling, and hack-written way. But in the meantime, you can try to hold back the chaos, knowing that nothing you try or accomplish will stop the tides of chaos from killing everyone in the world. Unless, of course, you develop super rat powers, like you somehow crush everybody that opposes you with the magical power of being the writer's pet. The same writers that decided to let the players determine how the battle for the world would end, only for their chosen one to get crushed in competitive place, setting up the stupidest conclusion where he suddenly beats everybody who was kicking his teeth in moments beforehand, only to get sucker punched out of nowhere by a guy who had just been thoroughly routed prior in a previous battle. But hey, they ignored that timeline because the wrong players won, so they blew up the world the way they wanted to instead of letting the good guys actually win one for once. Sure, they irked almost all the fan base, killed off their game, and rendered probably millions of dollars of miniatures sitting on shelves moot, but at least they got their new edition out with brand new trademark-friendly versions of the same damn races. Where was I? Oh yeah, magic. So arcane magic is dangerous to cast, as chaos is not something mortals were meant to know. In first edition, this was largely just a warning and pure fluff. In second edition and later, there was a chance that a spell would go horribly wrong and bad things would happen to your wizard. The first edition magic system was a mana point system, but in later editions it was based off your magic level. If you rolled badly, then you suffer on the bad magic chart. You can still succeed and have a bad magic result. The results go from trivial all the way to just eaten. You have been warned. Combat is meant to be deadly. You have few wounds, and armor is often little more than cosmetic. Monsters are rated from nuisance to tough to TPK. You aren't expected to survive a battle with a dragon, much less put up a fight. The most common foes are going to be of the human or animal variety. Even knowing about monsters like Skaven or Chaos Worshippers can be hazardous to characters' health. The low power is largely in part because the characters are regular people thrust into a life of adventure. A beggar doesn't decide to pick up a sword and start killing monsters for profit. More than likely, a Skaven thought he was tasty, and the beggar had to beat it to death with a brick, making him the most experienced Skaven slayer in the entire village. Some careers are devoted to combat or magic, but players can't be sure they will start with those careers. Once the players have put down a few bandits or cleared the forest of wolves, they might try to head out and find more challenging creatures to fight. The game includes the entire run of Warhammer's rogue gallery, from undead to Skaven to orcs to chaos to dark elves, and even the fierce but underappreciated chaos dwarves. Most of the time you're going to be playing inside the Empire, so you're going to be the fantasy equivalent of members of the Holy Roman Empire. It's a huge nation, but a lot of villains are regional, so you have to figure out why the dark elves across the ocean are there to threaten players. And it's very unlikely that the players are going to head across thousands of miles of wasteland to gaze upon the technological marvels in Zarnagrund. And of course, the problem with chaos is some of their monsters, especially the demons, are quite deadly. And even the mid-tier demons like Beasts of Nurgles or Juggernauts of Khorne will tear apart a party easily. Be very careful balancing these encounters. This isn't 5th edition D&D. Players can actually lose here. Most campaigns will focus on fighting a single type of foe, which is fine because there's a huge variety of bad guys of each type. The Vampire Counts of Sylvania are always a great bad guy, with loads of low-level undead backed up by a vampire at higher levels. Players can scythe through Skaven until they get to the Assassins or the Mad Warp Priests. Orcs love to fight, and there's a host of greenskins ready to go. If it's in the wargame, it's in the RPG. Even the Chaos Dwarves, even after they stopped supporting them and wish they would have gone away, even to the point of rigging tournaments to prevent Chaos Dwarf players from winning using the rules you wrote and the miniatures you created. Making tournament rules that specifically punish the army because their selection wasn't as expansive as Chaos or Empire. So when somebody takes their 10,000 points of Dwerizar down to Games Day and proceeds to rip through 6 different armies like they were made out of balsa wood and sits alone at the top of the leaderboard by a massive margin, only for the judge to zero out scores for army comp and painting because he didn't like your army, so the player drops from 1st place to 17th place with no chance of an appeal because of the subjective part of the tourney allowed judges to prevent anyone they wanted from winning without having to tell the person to their face they never had a chance of winning at all. 20 years later and I'm still bitter. 10,000 points of Chaos Dwarves sitting on that shelf. Where was I? 3rd edition. This is one of the most controversial versions of the game because the rights have been picked up by Fantasy Flight, who redesigned the system entirely, switching from a percentile-based system to a die pool system, using all custom dice with a system that would later be streamlined into their Star Wars RPG. 3rd edition was heavily criticized for several reasons. First, the starting box set was $100 retail. That made it the most expensive RPG in print at the time. Second, the gameplay was largely considered too complex, as the more you increased in power, the more the rules came into play. This complaint did have some merit, as the Star Wars system that evolved from it dropped a lot of the overly complicated mechanics, but still kept the overall dice system. Lastly, the game was said to be closer to a board game than an RPG, with tons of props, map sheets, and the mechanics playing more like Warhammer Quest to some people. Still, it was Fantasy Flight Games, and they're known for not skimping on high-quality products, even if they did kind of price themselves out of the market for a huge number of players. While the negatives of 3rd edition are well known, so are its strengths. Players were rewarded for cooperative play, with special abilities unlocked when the characters worked together. It was designed for party play. Lone wolf characters were at a serious disadvantage compared to team players. The storyteller die was another major strength of the system, where this adventure would often throw the players for a loop as the story branched out in an unexpected direction on the roll of a die, similar to the wild die system from Star Wars D6, only with a better written mechanic behind it. Again, the better parts of the Warhammer system were later adopted into the Star Wars RPG. The 3rd edition is a collector's item now, as prices on the second-hand market for Warhammer Fantasy Flight products have gone insane in the last few years. Cubicle 7 got the rights to Warhammer after GW ripped them from Fantasy Flight and promptly gave us 4th edition. It keeps the down-to-earth approach to the game from 1st and 2nd. The characters aren't adventurers full-time. They have jobs that occasionally require them to kill monsters. The imbalance between the races is still there, though humans are given more fate points to balance it out, making them harder to kill and luckier overall. They've also revamped the career system, as you can move on to advanced versions of careers once you complete the schemes, instead of just jumping to the next career in line. Combat was changed to a more fluid approach with the possibility to parry and riposte, as compared to the U-swing, I-swing method from previous editions. People are torn on 4th edition. It has some good points, and it changes some things people preferred from past editions. But its biggest advantage is it's still in print, at least until GW blows up the game world and makes Age of Sigmar mandatory. Warhammer Fantasy was a game loved for its lethality and brutality. Its critical hit system won over a lot of adolescents with its graphic description of what happens when you hit someone who's already low on hit points. It's not a game you get too attached to your character over. You are one bad hit away from making a new one. Instead of the farm boy that picked up a sword that decided to stab kobolds for fame and glory, you're a rat catcher that got really good at killing the really big rats, to the point you could advertise your skills as a master rat catcher. It humanizes the characters, making them feel like they were part of the world, where they weren't born to greatness, but they had to seize it themselves. Buying the game is easy unless you're looking for the Fantasy Flight 3rd Edition or the original GW hardbacks, all of which are collector's items. The other editions are either POD or easy to find on the secondhand market, with 4th edition again still in print. 2nd edition is probably the most popular of the older editions, as they captured the game at its height, and the source books covered all aspects of the setting. Plus it has the most comprehensive rules for the Chaos Dwarves. Next up, I'm finishing up the old World of Darkness setting with the game that makes Mork Borg look like a jaunty fantasy romp. Wraith the Oblivion, the one where the other player is trying to kill your character. That game. But until then, remember, Hashut rules, Hashut rules, Hashut rules the day. Oh, what fun it is to slay in Hashut's name, oy vey, hey!